Hello, this is Professor Kuehn and welcome back to my lectures on electricity, magnetism, and light, where we have been slowly reading together the work by James Clerk Maxwell titled On Action at a Distance. We are about on page 388 in a Student's Guide to the Great Physics Text, Volume 3, where Maxwell at the bottom of this page asks the question, how is the luminiferous medium related to our electromagnetic medium? So think about what he's asking in this question. Since the time of Huygens, at least, people were talking about there being a medium that is able to carry light from one place to another. In fact, light, according to Huygens, was a vibration of this ether, this ethereal medium that was thought to be filling all of space. Now, Maxwell, along with Faraday, are talking about a different kind of medium that is able to communicate forces between magnetized objects or between charges. This medium he calls magnetic fields or electric fields. It's a subtle substance, but it nonetheless exists. It's a physical thing that exists between magnets that communicates the force between them. So what he's asking in this question is, what is the relationship between the luminiferous medium, the one that carries light, and the electromagnetic medium, which communicates electric and magnetic forces? And he's going to talk about how one can calculate the speed of an electromagnetic disturbance through the electromagnetic medium and find that the speed of that disturbance happens to be just about the same speed as the speed that had just been measured of light. So we pick up at the bottom of page 388. He said the velocity of the disturbance in the electromagnetic medium, the velocity is very great, from 288 to 314 millions of meters per second, according to different experiments. Now, the velocity of light, according to Foucault's experiments, is 298 millions of meters per second. In fact, the different determinations of either velocity differ from each other more than the estimated velocity of light does from the estimated velocity of the propagation of small electromagnetic disturbances. So what is he saying here? Well, remember in lab this week, what you're doing is you're using your experiments on the force between two charged objects and the force between two current-carrying wires to calculate the speed of electric and magnetic disturbances. And what he's saying here is the variations in the values one would calculate from different measurements. So think about people in your class, different people measured Coulomb's law slightly differently. And so you got different values of epsilon naught, and perhaps you got different values of mu naught. So there's some scatter of values that one would get for the speed of electromagnetic disturbances in this electromagnetic medium. And he's arguing that the scatter in that differs more from each other than they do from the speed of light that had recently been measured by Foucault. He goes on to say, but if the luminiferous and the electromagnetic media occupy the same place, and transmit disturbances with the same velocity, what reason have we to distinguish the one from the other? By considering them as the same, we avoid at least the reproach of filling space twice over with different kinds of ether. So in other words, if on the one hand you've got these electromagnetic disturbances that are traveling through this electric and magnetic fields, and you've got this luminiferous ether that communicates light through a region of space, if those are occupied in the same region of space and the thing that travels through them goes at the same speed, why don't we just identify one with the other and say that they are the same thing? Besides this, the only kind of electromagnetic disturbances which can be propagated through a non-conducting medium is a disturbance transverse to the direction of propagation, agreeing in this respect with what we know of that disturbance we call light. So when there's a vibration of an electric or magnetic field, the only kind of vibration that can happen is one that is transverse to the direction of propagation in a non-conducting medium like glass. But we already know from the experiments that we've done with polarization that light is a transverse vibration. He says, hence, for all we know, light also may be an electromagnetic disturbance in a non-conducting medium. If we admit this, the electromagnetic theory of light will agree in every respect with the undulatory theory, and the work of Thomas Young and Fresnel will be established on a firmer basis than ever when joined with that of Cavendish and Coulomb by the keystone of the combined sciences of light and electricity, Faraday's great discovery of the electromagnetic rotation of light. So this is the main point that he's making, is that electromagnetic disturbances are light, and it unifies these seemingly different areas of research. The vast interplanetary and interstellar regions will no longer be regarded as waste places in the universe, which the Creator has not seen fit to fill with the symbols of the manifold order of His kingdom. We shall find them to be already full of this wonderful medium, so full that no human power can remove it from the smallest portion of space, or produce the slightest flaw in its infinite continuity. It extends unbroken from star to star, and when a molecule of hydrogen vibrates in the dog star, Sirius, the medium receives the impulses of these vibrations, and after carrying them in its immense bosom for 3 years, delivers them in due course, regular order, and full tale into the spectroscope of Mr. Huggins at Tulse Hill. So he's saying all of space, he's saying this in kind of a poetic way. He's saying that all of space is filled with this medium that's able to communicate these electromagnetic disturbances. And when a molecule of hydrogen in a distant star like Sirius, that is 3 light years away, gets sent out from the dog star, excuse me, it arrives at the laboratory of Mr. Huggins, must be a friend of Maxwell's. His spectroscope is a device used to measure light and its colors. But the medium has other functions and operations besides bearing light from man to man and from world to world, and giving evidence of the absolute unity of the metric system of the universe. Its minute parts may have rotary as well as vibratory motion, and the axes of rotation form those lines of magnetic force which extend in unbroken continuity into regions which no eye has seen, and which, by their action on our magnets, are telling us, in language not yet interpreted, which is going on in the hidden underworld from minute to minute and from century to century. And these lines must not be regarded as mere mathematical abstractions. They are the directions in which the medium is exerting a tension, like that of a rope, or rather, like that of our own muscles. The tension of the medium in the direction of the Earth's magnetic force is in this country 1 grain weight on 8 square feet. In some of Dr. Joule's experiments, the medium has exerted a tension of 200 pounds weight per square inch. So he's reminding us that just as these forces that the Earth pulls on a small magnet, or artificial electromagnets pull on other magnets, just as those forces are real, so too this medium that communicates these forces is real, not just a mathematical construct. But the medium, in virtue of the very same elasticity by which it is able to transmit the undulations of light, is also able to act as a spring. When properly wound up, it exerts a tension, different from the magnetic tension by which it draws oppositely electrified bodies together, produces effects through the length of a telegraph wire, and when of sufficient intensity, leads to the rupture and explosions called lightning. These are some of the already discovered properties of that which has been often called a vacuum, or nothing at all. Then enable us to resolve several kinds of action at a distance into actions between contiguous parts of a continuous substance. Whether this resolution is a nature of explication or complication, I must leave to the metaphysicians. I think it's important to recognize that although the idea of ether has fallen out of favor in recent years, especially with the work of Michelson and Morley, and the special relativity theory of Albert Einstein, I think it's important to recognize that the people who developed the electromagnetic theory of light, most notably Maxwell, fully believed in the existence of some subtle substance or ether, an electromagnetic ether, that filled space. I think there are good reasons to call into question its existence, but nonetheless, the fact is light is a very strange thing, and I hope over the semester you've come to appreciate some of the ways that people have approached the concept of light in a way that would increase their understanding and ours.